In this lesson, we'll be importing our assets and setting up our main composition to get started with our project. Okay, so to get started, I'm just opening up a blank After Effects document here. We do have a 02_begin in our After Effects project file, so if you want to open that, you can, but it's really just going to start you out at the same places where I am, which is nothing in my project panel. So let's go ahead and get some stuff in there so we can start working. So I'm just going to come over here, right click, go to Import File, and I am just right here inside of your project files folder that you downloaded, and we're going to go ahead and go into your reference files. So After Effects files is where we're going to be storing the projects that we'll be working on here, and this is all the stuff we're going to import. So first, let's just start up at the top. We'll go to Graphics, and Interface is the main thing that we're going to be importing. So if you watched our Designing Futuristic Menus in Illustrator course, this file right here, the interface.ai, is what we ended with in that last lesson. So that's what we're going to start with here, and we may have to take some liberties and change things around as we're working, but this is just our starting place with those graphics. And we set it up in such a way at the end of that course so that we could import it to this course and use those Illustrator layers as our files right here inside of After Effects. So to be able to access those, I'm going to come down here where it says import as footage, and we're going to change it to composition retain layer sizes. And that's going to just give us all of those Illustrator layers as our layers in After Effects. So it'll import that as a comp. So we'll go ahead and say open and import that interface.ai. And this is going to take a minute because this is a huge file. It's got a lot of little pieces in it, especially since it's being imported as a composition. It has to think a lot harder about all of those layers. There were over 100 layers in that project. So if you haven't watched that and you want to learn how to make the assets that we're going to be using, you can definitely jump back and watch that Illustrator course. And that's just going to help you to perfect your own pipeline. If you're working on projects where just you are working on it and you're creating your own assets, it's a great place to start. You'll learn a lot of tricks. Okay, so here we are. We've got our interface composition right there, and then you can see all of those layers inside of that folder that it brought in along with that. So we'll come back to that in a moment. Let's import a few other things. I'm just going to come over here, right click, go to Import File. I'm going to import that alert and the map world dots just as footage files, so we'll leave that as footage. Go ahead and say open to that, and then we'll come back over here again, import, and I'm going to import those maps as a composition retain layer sizes because that has several different pieces inside of it. So we'll go ahead and hit open, and we'll just go ahead and say okay. And if I go into that maps comp, you can see we have several different maps in here that have just some different information on them, kind of high contrast maps. So we'll go ahead and keep those around for later. We actually really don't need the comp itself. We're mostly just going to be working with those map layers that you see there. And I closed my timeline, so let's go ahead and open that back up. Okay, so we have a few other things to bring in just besides graphics. So let's come over here to our project panel. We'll go to Import File, and let's just back up a layer or a step. And instead of being in graphics, I'm going to go into that MP4 and Wave folder, and we're going to bring in all of these pieces of footage and sound. So we're going to be using these later in the project, so let's go ahead and bring those in. And then we have a few other things to bring in from farther on up here. So we've got our phone footage. We'll go ahead and go in there. And this has been brought in or rendered out rather as a PNG sequence. So we just shot that original footage that we're going to be comping this in and exported that then as a PNG sequence just so that you wouldn't lose any quality. You would have a super high quality version of that footage. So you want to go ahead and select that and make sure PNG sequence is checked on for our import. So I'll go ahead and say open for that. And this is going to take just a moment as well just to compile those into a piece of footage. And Now, before we do anything else, just so we don't forget, we want to make sure that this is being interpreted at the rate that it was shot at. And After Effects, usually, if you haven't messed with your settings at all, is going to default interpret footage as 30 frames per second. So that was 29.97, and even though that's not a big difference, it does slightly affect things. So I'm going to change that to 29.97 for the frame rate for our footage, and go ahead and say OK. And now you can see that frame rate is the same as all of those other pieces that we have are all 29.97. So that's going to be helpful. And then we have just a couple other pieces. Let's go ahead and go over here to File, and we'll go back up to those reference files, and we're going to come in here to our pictures, and we're just going to bring in all of those pictures. We'll be using those in the course later on as well. So go ahead and just select all of those, hit open. So now you can see we have quite a large amount of layers to be working with. So let's go ahead and organize our project panel really quickly, and I just want to organize this similarly to the way that we brought these in. So we'll just create a few folders here, and we'll just call this first folder Graphics. And inside of Graphics, let's only put PSD and Illustrator files, and that's just going to help to keep us a little bit more organized, just knowing what is where. And you see that our PSD files that we brought in were already put into a folder. So I'm going to go ahead and grab the map layers folder, and we'll just put that inside of our graphics folder. And I'll do the same with the interface layers, because technically those are graphics as well. And that looks like that's about it for those. Okay, let's go ahead and create a comps folder. So these compositions that we imported, we'll just go ahead and make them their own folder. And we'll just go to new folder, and we'll type comps. And I'll just select both of those, and we'll drag them into the comps folder right there. If I toggle that down, you can see they were added inside. And maybe we'll split up our audio and video just a little bit more. So let's just make a folder that says audio. And that's where these 3 wave files will be placed. And then we'll have one more for video. So new folder, video. And that's where we'll put that tracking reference.mp4. And if you want to, we can also put our phone footage in that folder as well. So right there, what you see as that PNG sequence, technically that isn't a video, it's a sequence, but it's still going to be used as a video, so we can go ahead and put that in there. And then let's just create a folder for these photographs since we have so many. So we'll do new folder and just call this photos, or you could call it pictures if that's easier. So we'll go ahead and just select all of those and drag those in there. And now we are just way more organized. It's going to be way easier over here in our project panel just to find anything that we might need as we're working. Now I do want to come over here to video, and let's just go ahead and create our newest composition. That's going to be our main comp for everything. So you just want to grab that phone footage, and if you didn't earlier, just make sure you go ahead and fix that frame rate by interpreting your footage to 29.97. And then we'll just drag this piece of footage onto the new comp button. Now this footage was shot at 1920 by 1080, so we have a pretty big image here. And in the end, my final output, I only want it to be 1280 by 720. But we're going to do a little bit of some fancy work at the end to make this look like it has a camera shake. You can see now as I click through here, we don't have any kind of movement. It's a static shot. So what I want to do is scale this piece of footage down pretty considerably, but still leave just a little bit on those edges, just to make it a little bit bigger than 1280 by 720. So the way that I want to do that is to take whatever 5% of 1280 by 720 is and add that on. So it'll be like we scaled up a piece of footage that 1280 by 720 was sitting at just 5%. So to do that, I'm just going to bring up my calculator here, and I'm just going to do it for the 720. So we'll just type in 720 times 0.05, and that's the same as 5% of 720. 36. So we're going to take that 36 and add it onto 720. But first, we're going to need to scale down this 1080 piece of footage. So we're going to add 36 and just go ahead and go plus 720, and that's 756. So we're going to just remember that number. I'm just going to drag this over here for a second, and then let's mess with our composition settings for our phone footage. So just come up here, go to composition settings, and right now we have it at 1920 by 1080. So I'm just going to turn this down to 1280 by 720. And you can see kind of how that changes that. Now make sure you keep your lock aspect ratio to make sure that that is checked on. And then instead of putting this at 720, we're going to put it at 756. So it's a little bit of a non-standard size, but in the end, it's going to be just what we need to add that camera shake without losing any kind of quality in our footage. So go ahead and say okay. And the reason why I'm doing it this way instead of just working at the 1920 by 1080 is because it's going to be a lot faster for us to RAM preview this smaller size. So now we have the right comp size that we need, but this is still a little bit too big. So let's just come in here and kind of scale this down. And earlier, I found that if I just put in 70%, that really just snaps that right onto the edge. So you can just scale it down as much as you want. You're not going to lose a lot of information on the edges, so it's up to you. But if you just type in 70 and you're using those measurements that I told you about, then that's going to be perfect. So now we have our footage size down to the right size that we need. We're going to be working at this size for the rest of our work until we get to the end whenever we're going to add some other things. But we're going to be working at this size for quite a while. So you want to make sure you go ahead and change that now, and that will just help you to have everything ready by the end. So in this lesson, we went ahead and brought in all of our assets and imported a few different things in different ways to get the right results later on once we start manipulating some of our layers. We also created our main composition for our footage, and we also got our project panel organized over here just so all of our pieces of footage were in the proper folders, and we'll be able to stay organized as we work throughout the rest of this course.